will and talent are something, but will and talent don't make a career. Winning is a learned skill, and you're going to learn the skill of winning while you craft a thoughtful thinking way of looking at it to make really good decisions.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I am so thankful that you're here, grateful for you showing up every week and every episode to listen to the great guests that I have and cheer on and support me as well. Today, I am fulfilling my promise to you with another amazing success story. I've got Dr. Jeff Spencer with me. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Well, Mike, thanks again. Just can't wait for a conversation.
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about Jeff, and then we'll get going. So Dr. Jeff Spencer is a former Olympic athlete and high performance trainer for some of the biggest names in the world, like Lance Armstrong, Tiger Woods, Sir Richard Branson, and Bono. He's been named the International Sports Chiropractor of the Year, and he's a world famous blown glass artist. Jeff designs, tracks, and evolves personalized success programs for individuals, groups, and organizations to teach them to own the zone when it counts. He helps people adopt a champion mindset and leads them to perform at their highest level possible. He's helped companies thrive by improving their culture, catapulted cycling teams to win 8 Tour de France's, and helped athletes win more than 40 Olympic and World Championship medals. Jeff is also the author of 3 books about the champion mindset, Total Training for Motocross, Total Taping, and Turn It Up, How to Perform at Your Best for a Lifetime. And beyond all this success, Jeff's most important achievement has been the adoption and parenting of his daughter, Maddie. Jeff, I start every show with the same simple question. How did it happen for you?
Well, it actually happened for me at 7 years of age when I wanted to become an Olympian. It's like it chose me, I didn't choose it. And that's where the curiosity got turned on, and I have the self-start gene, so I never needed to be motivated to pursue and investigate those things that are in front of me. And that's where it all started. And I was fortunate to have 3 angels come into my life that made the difference between having high aspirations and inquiries and being able to manifest those as bodies of evidence of what's possible. So that's really how the first domino fell. And knowing that no one wins alone, I had just amazing help in the process that got cultivated and crafted and drew out of me that which was already there to be able to manifest some of the things that I did, whether it's art, sports, science, or anything that certainly acknowledge and recognize the essential contribution of the people that I was around. Otherwise, it would not have been possible.
So I really appreciate the age 7 thing, Jeff. I have something similar. For me, like an entrepreneurial seed was planted in me when I was 4 years old, and I was sitting on the curb in front of my house, my parents' house, and I was watching these trucks across the street, and just it was a construction company, and these trucks, I just remember them coming in, coming out, the dust, the smoke, the smell, and for whatever reason, that stuck with me like for my whole life. And then so I ultimately ended up working with trucks and owning businesses that own trucks and that kind of thing. And I'm wondering what came to you. What were you doing at age 7 when this came to you? Can you give me I want to know more about how this implanted itself in you at age 7.
I think first and foremost, there is a receptivity, because I've always been one that is receptive to ideas and possibility. And I feel like when we hold that level of receptivity, then it provides a runway for things to land. If we're in too much pursuit of something, we kind of shut down possibility. If we make judgments about what we believe to be possible in advance, which is a pretty strong human characteristic, then we automatically can't even get out of the starting gate. So for sure, it was a receptivity of exploring what was possible. I never did anything with the idea of showcasing my greatness to showcase and put the attention on myself. I never thought about that. And I was not competitive to show other people who was boss. It was never like that. It was really an inquiry that came from a calling that showed up. And I recognized the calling because there was a gravity there. And I've never been
Mm.
hesitant to engage those things that show up like that. As a matter of fact, that's how I've lived my entire 70 years on this planet, is through that receivership and the faithfulness to engage it and do what's necessary to fulfill the possibility of that, not really knowing what the outcome could be.
And was it something you went and told your parents about and then started planning, or was it?
That's a great that's a great question. Well, I didn't really even realize that parents were there to help, quite
Oh,
honestly,
okay.
because my parents were non-existent in a certain sense, where they never intervened in my life, suggested I do this or that, but they never criticized me either. It was like, okay, well, I guess parents are just supposed to be there, and you're the one that has to figure everything out.
Mm.
That's just the way it seemed to me. Isn't that the way it is for everybody? I guess not. And therefore, I did have the self-start gene, so I was lucky, and it was up to me to figure it out. And thank goodness on the Strength Finder, my greatest strength is a strategist, meaning that I can figure things out and I can figure out how to get from point A to point B with a high degree of accuracy and confidence. So that's kind of really how it happened. But I also maintain a receptivity to sound counsel. I was always coachable. I never wanted it my way. I was never going to throw a diva tantrum if I didn't get it my way. I
Mm.
always knew that, yeah, I maybe had raw capacity, but unless that's harnessed and directed, I will not be able to fully manifest whatever that potential is. So again, I had like three angels that came into my life that really did make the difference at critical moments in my life that allowed me to become a manifester rather than just a dreamer. Big difference between dreamer and manifester.
And before I get into the angels, what about siblings, Jeff? Did you have siblings that you?
Yeah, I have a brother that's 2.5 years younger than myself. Just a great guy. Our personality is going to be more different. He's like a monk, just a
Oh,
very gentle guy that has his own brilliance and genius, literally speaking. And he's really good at two-dimensional art. He was in massive demand for his ability to creatively think about the manifestation of things and being able to draw exactly what that looks like when the process has been completed, where I'm like basically a warrior. I'm, ready to take the field. And when I move into the Coliseum and it's me and one competitor, well, I'm going to be the guy that leaves. I'm not going to be the guy that's laying on the ground. It's just kind of the way it is that, helped me become an Olympian and some of the other things that I've done. And again, I'm extraordinarily competitive, not for my own sake, because I don't feel like I need to prove anything to myself or demonstrate anything to other people other than showing them that whatever's within them is possible if we show up and we develop the skill to take the ideas that we have and be able to do what's necessary to manifest them in three dimension. So that's the distinction. We couldn't be more different, but yet we're cut from the same cloth.
got it. And that competitiveness that you mentioned, Jeff, is that sort of universal in everything that you do in life, or can you compartmentalize your competitiveness? I'm always curious about people who describe themselves as ultra competitive, or I describe myself as competitive. But there are some things that I can be okay with not being, number one at if I don't feel like
Yeah.
being number one is important to me.
Yeah. Well, being number one isn't important to me at all.
Okay.
What's important to me is that if something shows up as a possibility, it's a gift that's presented to you, I can accept that and I can take action on it and I can commit to it to see how far it could go. So that curiosity, that's the only way I made an Olympic team. I mean, it called me to it. I showed up in service. I did what I had to do for my side of it willingly, not to showcase myself. I didn't need to be number one. I had nothing to prove to anybody. My scorecard in life is, did I show up? And did I accept what was put in front of me? And did I honor it? And did I honor my talents? And as a result of that, some of the byproducts are is that you do show other people what's possible. And in today's world, I think that that's really important because it awakens something in them, which puts them in a different state of personal belief to be able to create certain things. But it also is a process by which the people that have helped us get to where we can get to are honored in that. I feel like there's no better way to say thank you than to demonstrate the manifestation of what people have shared with us that have helped us get in a position to showcase what's possible. So
Okay.
I'm not
Got it.
competitive against any other person on this
Interesting.
planet. I'm not even competitive or judgmental against myself. It's like, did I show up for duty? Did I do what I was called to do faithfully with an unconditional heart that was willing to do whatever it took to explore the possibility of what that was?
Right. And you, thanks for clarifying that, by the way. The the difference you said, there's a difference between a dreamer and a manifester. Could you, let's go into that a little bit more, because I think I know what you mean, but I want to be sure I understand your thinking about that.
Well, simply put, um, goal setting is not goal achievement. Goal setting is a target, but the achievement of that is the manifestation. And it also demonstrates the competency of the individual. But more importantly, it shows everybody else that you can dream as much as you want. You can stay in belief, but until things are manifested, it's not real. And if it's not real, then the contribution to humanity and one's own legacy doesn't happen. It just remains a thought or a possibility in one's head. And I do feel that we need to complete that cycle of action to then develop a greater sense of belief and knowing and connecting with our capacity to manifest things that can be a benefit to ourselves in terms of the quality of life that we live, but also contribute to humanity as well.
Okay. And do you believe that you can be a good manifester if you are not a goal setter, are the two
No,
interconnected?
I don't think that that's possible because
Okay.
if you don't have a target, how do you get to the finish line? Because there is no
Right.
finish line.
Yeah.
So, again, we have to also be clear that goal achievement is not goal setting. Most people think, well, okay, I set the goal and all the experts tell me somehow it's automatically supposed to backfill
Oh,
and
yeah.
take me to the promised land, the finish line. That's not true either. There's a goal setting is one part of the process, but we need to make sure that we have the right goal because it may not be the right goal. And we need to make sure that we have a structure that allows us to prepare well to then begin pursuing the goal and to understand what the goal pursuit process is from inception to goal completion itself. I think most people, that's not almost a consideration, but to me, it's like fundamental. In goal achievement is life's fundamental skill. It is absolutely the highest skill because, again, you cannot. As I tell my daughter, you're here on this planet to be able to showcase your unique gifts, and there's only one of you in all of creation. And we kind of have, in my opinion, like a moral obligation to manifest what our gifts are. As a matter of fact, that's the definition of a champion to me. It's a gift manifester. It's not a competitor against everybody else, but it's like, have we developed and do we showcase the skills that we're innately given? And to me, that's what a champion is. And why that's important is that it levels the playing field about the definition and the aspiration.
Mm.
And another side of this, I think, is really important is that we should never decide in advance the impact or the value of what our goals are and our achievements are, because you really don't know. And of course, in today's world, you're supposed to know how you're going to influence a billion people. And if you're not influencing a billion people, then it's not a goal worth pursuing. I mean, that some people feel like that, like what
Right.
I'm doing is insignificant. Well, no, it's not. And how can you say that? Because, when I was working in a bike shop, a guy came in and was wearing a T-shirt that said USA Olympic team on it. He probably doesn't even remember wearing the T-shirt, but I saw the T-shirt. I wanted the T-shirt. The only way he could get it was to become an Olympian. I was called to that, as I shared earlier.
All right.
And so I went home and I got my box of crayons. I got a piece of paper and I drew the T-shirt that he was wearing And I created a plan how I was going to do it. I was going to work hard, be brave, and never make an excuse. That was my plan. And I faithfully looked at that and followed that for 10 years. I had a great coach, and eventually I was an Olympian. So my point is here is that every one of us, there's only one of us in all of creation, which uniquely qualifies us to do something of high contribution to humanity. And in my opinion, we should never judge the importance of what we do by the magnitude as we perceive it, because it's always going to be less than we think that it should be. That's just like the human
Right.
condition. But the fact that this guy wore a t-shirt that he doesn't even remember wearing, it changed my life forever, and he doesn't even know it. So therefore, I feel that to develop and have a tranquility of being and to serve a purpose that's worth getting up to, uh, we set a deadly trap for ourselves if our trap is comparison against others as being the criteria by which we decide our value as a human, as uh, shared and shown through the goals that we achieve.
Yeah, it's a total loser's game because you
100%.
start comparing yourself to others, you're always going to find someone that you feel you don't compare to. Always,
Yeah.
no
Yeah,
matter
even
what.
even if you're at the top of the pile, it's still
Right.
never enough,
Yeah.
or maybe this is the wrong thing, whatever. So I completely agree with you. That's why I feel, Mike, that it's really important that we understand the kind of operational definition of success, value, contribution, champion, et cetera. Because I think people have got, or the world as we know it and what human nature informs us of it as being is an unattainable something that can't deliver on the promise of accomplishment, at least a momentary senses of satisfaction and self-value and self-worth as a contributor.
Mm. Can we, and it's interesting too, the t-shirt thing, insignificant to the guy wearing it, but since you had already established this goal at age 7,
Yeah, it showed up.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
showed up, right?
it
You
showed
were
up.
looking for it.
Right, right,
Like
right. So
you were,
yeah,
I'm looking for this.
yeah, it's sort of like a car. If you're thinking about
Yeah,
buying a car, then all of a sudden that's the only car that you see when you're driving
right.
around, right?
Yeah,
It's sort of the
exactly.
same deal,
Yeah.
right? So therefore, part of this is giving ourselves permission to really entertain what the possibilities that we think are without doing a self edit too soon about our inability, or nobody in our family's ever done that before. How hard is this going to be?
Right.
We do have to learn to apply the skill of uncensored possibility thinking and giving ourselves permission to really entertain thoughts that are really there and not to exclude or place a judgment or exclude them for any reason in advance of giving them a fair consideration.
Can you tell me more about the three angels, Jeff? You mentioned the three angels a couple of times, and
I
I'd like to
did.
understand that better.
When I was 13, I showed extraordinary ability on a bicycle at 10. And that's how I realized, oh, so I'm going to become an Olympian. It's going to be cycling, because I didn't know how I was going to do it. But I just showed this freak of nature ability on a bicycle, which I didn't know was there. And so, oh, that's how it's going to happen. And I was involved with the local club, and they were very nurturing of me, but it wasn't enough to tease out what had to be there to become an Olympian. And last time I saw my dad when I was 13. So when my dad kind of exited the equation, just drifted into obscurity, which is its own story. There was a cyclist that came to me. He was a 3-time Olympian, 5-time national champion. And he said, Jeff, I'd like you to join my training group. And the reason why is because I believe that there's something in you that needs to be around the conversation of what it takes to evolve and grow your talents to their fullest capacity. And you need to be around that conversation now so that you grow up around that. If it's in you to hear that, then you belong here. If you don't resonate with the conversation when you hear, then it's not in you. And I can't put anything into you that's not already there, but I can awaken what is there. You're not going to do our training. I'll tell you what to do for your training, but you're going to be part of this conversation. And he said, will and talent are something, but will and talent don't make a career. Learning or winning is a learned skill. And you're going to learn the skill of winning while you craft a thoughtful thinking way of looking at it to make really good decisions because you're around this group of people that are highly committed to remaining national champions and Olympians. And so that was first angel for sure. And teaching one how to win as a skill, which he did really well. I could not have asked for anything more like than that. And I did become an Olympian like 10 years later. And that was essential in that. And then when I was 18 and I was enrolled at the University of Southern California as a scholarship student, and I had aspirations of becoming an Olympian, I was still 3 years away from that. I met my second angel through a neighbor of mine by another coincidence, so to speak. But this was my life mentor. He was 76 and I was 18 at the time, kind of an unusual pairing. And he was a Renaissance man. He was a university trained metallurgist. He was a war correspondent, World War One. He was an author, prolific poet, playwright, Shakespearean actor. He won an Emmy for an award-winning film done as creative philosophy that my neighbor did the filming and the editing of. And that's how I met him, through that film that I watched. And that's how he chose me to be his apprentice, where I was going to help him create his glass masterpieces. And it was sort of an unusual pairing because here we are, athletic guy that's got athletics on the brain. That's all he thinks about. That's all he's thought about. And now you're choosing him to be your artistic support person to help you create your masterpieces. And the value of that, Mike, is that during our breaks and at lunch, I had a modest scholarship from him, and I met with him every weekend. Was that he played classical music to me. He said, I need to fill you up on the great philosophers and the great literary works of history. You need to understand the creative minds and how they think. So he filled me with all that stuff. And he said, I need to fill you up with this stuff. And so again, I had that capacity to do that, meaning that nobody could put anything into you that you don't already have, at least an awakening, a capacity for. And so he filled me up with that. So we had this kind of unique composite. We had the athletic warrior type that was in the university, and I have a really good mind. I was becoming a sports scientist simultaneously, but then the creative artist side of me was being cultivated. So those three parts together formed a vision and a lens and a filter by which I was experiencing and responding to life through. That was multidimensional, that actually made me better at all of them had I just spent all my time in one of those particular areas. Right. And then the third angel that I had was in the cycling world, and I met him just prior to becoming an Olympian. And there was a dignity about him, the way that he showed up. He was immaculately dressed and appointed. He had a beautiful command of language with a heavy French accent because he was French. And he had a dignity and a non-judgment about him that I found very attractive. And I wanted to understand the why behind that. And so he took a liking to me, but I found out why he carried this, is that he was a World War II concentration camp survivor, being 6 years in a concentration camp, being exposed to the most obscene human atrocities conceivable, but yet he didn't have a venomous or a vindictive bone in his body. This was the most reconciled, beautiful human being that I've ever met. And so he taught me humility, and he taught me humanity, and that being mixed with the soul side from my creative mentor and the physical side from my Olympic coach, it created those three mind, body, and soul components that kind of merged into like a me that had a certain filter, that looked at things in a certain way, because those things were cultivated. They were awoken within me, and then they were cultivated. So that was a very unusual situation for me.
And Jeff, when was it that you recognized that these three individuals were, in fact, as you describe them now, angels?
Immediately, because I didn't really know my dad that much before he left when I was 13. I always thought that I was supposed to figure it out for myself because that's the way I'm, right. That's the way I'm living. Yeah. But I knew that I couldn't do it alone, and I knew that there was a level of guidance that I couldn't give myself, and I knew that I needed help, and it was unmistakable how these people showed up. It could be considered coincident, but I don't think it was. I think it was providence for sure. And I recognize that, and I give all credit to, God Almighty for putting those people in my life, because
Yeah.
uh, being such a physical guy, there was a lot of frustration that I grew up with. I grew up way too fast, having way too much responsibility, way too early, and being the warrior that I am. That's not a good combination for uh, being the most tranquil of people. There was an explosive side to me that I didn't ask for, but I never had the guidance to learn the skills, and I just had too much thrown at me way too fast that I didn't ask for. And these guys tempered me in a way that could harness the energy and the capacity for committing to something and fulfilling it to completion. And without them, it would have never happened. But I couldn't put them in my own way. They had to show up, which they did.
Right.
And again, the circumstances were unmistakable that this is more than just chance, for sure.
Huh. I think that's amazing that you recognized it so clearly, because I think so many of us have similar things happen and similar people come into our lives, and they have a tremendous impact, but we don't realize it until much later. It's
Mhm.
like you might even dislike it, because whether it's a
Yeah.
coach or, something, you dislike it and you don't
Yeah.
realize till many years later, like, oh my gosh, if they were giving me a gift and I was doing all I could to sort of repel the gift. And now I think
Yeah.
to myself, man, if I had only opened up
Yeah.
more to that gift, where would I be?
Yeah. And for sure, just a quick story, if I could, it's like my my life mentor, should we say, I was having a particularly bad day. And he said to me, "Man, you look like you're having a bad day." And I said to him, "Well, yeah, I haven't had many good ones, as you well know from where I came from."
Ooh,
And he said, "Well, would you like a helping hand?" I thought to myself, "Oh my God, how did this guy do that?" He's reading my mind. And I said, "Yeah, if there was ever a day where I really needed a helping hand, this is it. So I graciously accept your offer." And he looked at me with these steely blue eyes, and he said, "If you want a helping hand, you got one at the end of each arm." And he turned around and walked out of the room.
ooh,
And I knew he was right.
yeah,
And so did he. And he knew not to interfere with me being able to solve this through humility. If I could pause long enough to ask the question and be given the guidance to know how to fulfill the vacuum here, he didn't impose on that because he knew that he would have ruined me had he jumped in and saved me. And so, just another demonstration of uh, the power of committed, and loving mentorship. There is no replacement for that, because we may not find it even in our own family.
right.
It may be
Yeah.
outside the family, but again, no one can live alone. No one wins alone. It's not possible. And if we can remain in receivership, and we can apply, and we're open to good counsel, then we can shortcut all the challenges that we'll face in a lifetime, and we won't have to learn things the hard way. Unfortunately, human nature doesn't enable that as much as it should. But I was really fortunate to have been given a temperament where I wouldn't resist those things that I knew to be true through resonant recognition of what the opportunity was. And so, again, a certain characteristic that was gifted to me that served me really well.
And this may not be a great question, so forgive me if it's not. When you achieved your dream to become an Olympian, and that was over, happened, it was over. Which of the three angels was the one, if there was one, that you relied upon the most to take the next step in your life?
I never thought about that. I thought that the most important thing for me was to be in receivership, to carry an openness about me
Yeah.
that would allow something to land at the right time. And I learned very early that if I made these exotic, elaborate, highly aspirational plans, I could get nothing better than that in life. And I found that I could get much better than that in life if I remained open to possibility. And when things would show up as a possibility, if I could look at them with some level of consideration, like this
Oh,
is a
okay.
good idea, but not for now, or that this is not a good idea ever, or this is a good idea that I should be exploring now, I had the discernment to be able to see that, but I also had the receivership ability. I've always found that, uh, quite honestly, it's important to have goals and aspirations for sure, but the reality of those needs to be adjusted when the execution of them meets the reality of what life really is and what the circumstances are in the moments where the action steps are being created to manifest this. Because you may find, I learned this in art, that and I showed my art eventually in the best galleries in the world with the
Right.
best class artists as an extension of my work with my mentor, by the way. And I found that when you remain open to the creative process, you'll find that a piece of work that you're working on may be suggesting to you in process, you consider doing something different than you originally proposed. And I found that universally, when you always follow that, then you could create an artistic piece which was far above and beyond what you originally considered possible. And I realized, well, that's exactly the same thing in life. You know, if we have an idea and we pursue it, but yet there's a little tweak that shows up that suggests that we make a trajectory adjustment, then we do that, because it always ends to a bigger, better, but you're not giving yourself your own solution. You're just there as an executor faithfully of the new direction. And if you can receive it as a gift, then that's a pretty easy way to do life. And I do credit that with, you know, I'm 70 now. I don't know what that's supposed to look or feel like, but yeah, you know, most of my friends are in their 30s and 40s. They're very ambitious. They've got great ideas. I'm kind of their corner man. I'm their North Star that helps them stay on track and avoid preventable problems and not have to learn things the hard way. But yeah, I think it's added to my level of youthful exuberance and my ability to stay in game, because I never felt like the weight of the world in my successes depended directly on me struggling. I always felt,
Right.
you know, I'm always going to have enough energy to do it. Has to go right to manifest something. And if I remain in receivership of these options, it just has always worked out really well for me with that.
Well, it's kind of like your first angel, sort of seeing that he felt like maybe you needed to be around a different kind of people, different kind of
Absolutely.
mindset. And when you said hanging out with 30 and 40-year-olds, I have this saying, like, I want to be around people who are winding up, not people who are winding
You
down.
know what? That's
So,
perfect. I may
I,
steal that with you with your permission. I'll give you full
yeah,
attribution for that, but
sure.
that's actually true.
So when when you the other thing about the artwork that you said that makes a ton of sense, right? You set a goal, you start moving towards it, and all these, as you're moving forward towards the accomplishment of your goal, you're being hit with all these other things that may change the actual
Right.
direction or
Yeah.
trajectory or whatever, and of course make it better, right, than you imagined at the beginning, because you didn't know all these things that would come at you before you got started. And I think that a lot of people get scared about starting, but because they can't imagine the end actually happening. And I say, well, the end's never going to happen if you don't get started, and don't worry about the end. Just worry, just know it, just start somewhere where you want to be going, and the end will become clear to you as you make your way down the road.
Yeah. You see, a lot of this is mythology. A lot of what we're told about goal achievement and champions life is not right. It's inaccurate. It's being told by people that have never lived the experience, or they share something to tickle our ears that promises generally a shortcut. But, you know, the truth is that every prolific achiever in any discipline that lives a life of joy, you know, in excitement, of vitality, of new, always adopts this. When a better option shows up or there's a tweak to what we're doing, you always give it a thought and a look. And if there's a gravity there to follow it, then they always adjust it, because that's what leads to exponential, assuming
Right.
you have the right team. But it also, what you said there speaks to the fact that if you don't know where to start, it means that you don't know how to plan and prepare to pursue a goal. That's what that means to me. And so there are some things that we do need to know. We do need to learn that there is a structure on goal achievement, which I've actually created. It's called the Goal Achievement Roadmap. That's actually a process that I've created that shows us how to, number one, select the right goal. You know, it's a big question. Do we have the right goal? There's all sorts of goals. There's big, audacious goals, there's smart goals. But yeah, but is it the right one for us at the right time? You know, because if it is, then it gives us a different level of focus and a different set of readiness. So there's a whole way of preparing yourself to, number one, is this the right goal and should I pursue it? Second question, And what do I need to do to get ready to pursue it in advance of pursuing it? So unless that preparation has been worked out, our anxiety still stays high.
Yeah.
We got to get that as low as possible to know that we have the team, to know that we got the plan, to know that we got the materials, the supplies, the
Lower anxiety, more confidence.
that's correct.
Okay.
That's exactly right. But it's based on a body of evidence. It's not based on a mantra or
Yeah.
an affirmation that you're giving yourself. It's based upon concrete evidence that you're looking at that confirms your state of readiness. And to me, readiness is everything. So without that, and then also knowledge of what the path from goal inception is to goal completion is, then we put ourselves at risk as well, because many times people talk themselves prematurely out of remaining in pursuit of the goal because they're misinterpreting what the experience really is. They think, well, it's getting hard here, or my motivation is worn off, therefore wrong goal, something wrong with me. No, it's not. That's supposed to happen. But it's like, if you don't know what's supposed to happen, then your human nature will talk you into something that it's not, that could potentially, pull you out of an achievement that's of personal significance, that breeds confidence in you to go for more. So I just feel like this whole idea of goal setting and goal creation, I think it's in many instances back to front, and the mythology behind it puts many of us in doubt unnecessarily, and it puts us in fear. And if we're in fear, then it creates avoidance. And I think a lot of this is just because the conversation that's happening isn't the real conversation of what it really takes to be able to make that happen.
As you were talking there, I was thinking to myself, yeah, people, you can get started, right? And you're like, well, I'm going to do this goal I'm going to pursue this goal until the first wall shows up. And when that wall shows up, that's going to be evidence to me that this wasn't the right goal. And I'm
Yeah,
going to
see,
turn
that's
around and,
that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my
right,
life.
right, right.
I mean, but that's what human nature does conclude.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it really does conclude. But the champions, they say, okay, great. So we got this plan here. Where do we anticipate the walls coming up? Because there are certain points where you need to expect that it's going to get hard.
Yeah. It's going to be here.
It's going to be here. And that actually informs you what you need to do that you couldn't have conceived of in advance. So it's actually your friend. It's not the enemy. But we look at it as an incapability, that if we were only good enough, we should have known this. Well, how are we supposed to know this in advance? It's not like that. So again, like I think we're saying the same thing, that there's a reality behind this, but then there's the mythology of the popular conversation that generally can't deliver on the promise, because if we look at what history tells us, it's not subscribing to the process by which history tells us to be true, that allows us to predictably get from point A to point B.
Jeff, how did the path go or developed for you to become not just a chiropractor but this high level coach, cornerman, all this champion mindset? I mean, how do you get yourself into a position where, I mean, you come from a high level, right? You're an Olympic athlete. Of course, there's credibility there. You've had these angels around you that have really shaped you in different ways, which I found amazing, the story about that. But, then you're on your own. You have to, right? What did your mentor say? You got two hands there at the end of,
Yeah, for sure.
at the end of your
Best
arms,
advice
right?
I ever got. Yeah.
Right. So how did you make that happen?
Well, I've always had the gift of being able to read the context and knowing what to do next to move things forward towards completion or get into the winner circle. I've always had that forever. I just have an ability to size ambition up against context and know the path forward and know what to do now to keep things moving forward. I've always had that.
Yeah.
And so the Olympian part of me was, okay, there has to be a certain performance capacity that has to be there. And it's something that can be evolved over time, specific to whoever we are. And then again, following the sort of the tripod that I had, being an Olympian, I know what it takes to get to the top and stay there. And of course, everybody says, well, I'm not a champion, therefore I can't go there. Well, you don't know that. Are you manifesting your gifts? Yeah. Well, great. Well, then you're a champion. So let's not talk ourselves out of something too prematurely. So I know that, and I know that really well. You can't read books about it and be it. It's not possible. If you're going to be an advisor, it has to be in your DNA, which for me it was. And so then with my academic training, where I got my master's degree in sports science, I knew how to craft a body that could push and stay in the game over the long term. And if you don't have the health to push, we're not going to manifest our best life. It's not possible. It takes energy. And if we can't stay in the game over the long term, then we have a short runway, making our full and complete legacy impossible. So there's a fitness health side to this that has to be there. You cannot think your way beyond the health challenges that will not enable you to get there. And so with those two things, when I started working with athletes to win gold medals and business people who wanted to become their own champion in business,
Right.
uh, then the athlete said, well, I need to extend my career by not getting injured or coming back quickly and thoroughly. And the business people said, well, how do I not die in my early 40s or late 30s from stroke or heart attacks like I'm seeing happen? How do I not do that? And rather than refer out to the resources that I had, I said, well, I'll go back to school and I'll get my licensure to handle that side of it, which I did. And that's where the chiropractic came into it, where I was a specialist in acute trauma and in wellness care. And I was at top of the pile, actually, in those things. And so how that played a role is that in dealing with individuals and groups, I not only knew what had to happen as an individual showing up in what the individual needs to do to capitalize on opportunity and avoid preventable problems. I know how to do that because that's what the Olympic experience is about at the highest level. So I knew that really well. And I knew the body part from my academic history, my scholastic achievements. And then with the health side of it that I learned based upon the requests and the comments from my clients, I became a specialist in that. So I eventually developed the ability to see all parts of an individual or a team's universe in its entirety, both personally and professionally, mind, body, soul. And I could see how all the parts were integrating. And I could see what should be there that's not. I could see where it's lopsided. I could see where things that shouldn't be there need to get removed from it. I could see where things need to be strengthened, things need to be loosened. So all the parts of the system are optimized, that creates a harmony that enables exponential performance to happen. I had that ability because I was a specialist in the whole. I was a specialist in the generalization, which is not what the mind wants to hear. The mind wants the specific specialist in the area. Okay, great. Well, that's what a coach is for. A coach can help you in a specific area. So when I was working with U2, Bono had a voice coach. Great, he should. But what about the rest of Bono's life that would get in the way of his ability to use his voice? Who is addressing that? Well, nobody. I mean, the voice coach couldn't help him with that. And that was the risk to the ability to use the voice. And if we look at the other side of this, somebody needs to be observing all the parts. And if we look at, let's take the movie Rocky or Creed, right? Rocky had Mickey, the old guy in his corner that had seen everything in life. And when Mickey was slugging it out in the ring, taking all the body blows and stuff, it kind of sounds like life, doesn't it? So while someone is taking the body blows and on the verge of getting knocked out in life, Mickey or a Mickey equivalent could be telling them in real time what to do to avoid the punch, to stay in the game, to eventually transcend it. And that's a coach kind of can't do that. That's an older person's wisdom at play that's reading the pattern that can extract what to do specific to that situation. And that's like what I do. It takes about 60 years to get there, to have a broad-based ability to have the capacity for doing what Mickey did for Rocky or what Rocky did for Creed in the movie. Because at a certain point, well, as we evolve, we're making a lot of assumptions on what we believe it to be that haven't been tested yet, and there may be no historical evidence for it. And if we learn it the hard way, that may cost us a decade or two of lost time due to the errors that we created through our presumption that wasn't true. So maybe it's a really good idea to have somebody that understands life in its totality, that can look at your universe and decipher where are the mines in the minefield of your life that you don't see yet, that if you don't avoid, they could blow you up.
Right.
So I think it's really important that, sure, we have our coaches for the nuances, the specific slices of the pie. We have mentors that have a little bit more bandwidth. I have a health mentor, I've got a life mentor, I've got a business mentor. That's great. But what about the rest of your life? That's maybe a quarter or a half the pie. Well, what about the rest of the pie? Well, then you need the corner man that's seen everything, that knows what to do with the parts. Are there too many parts here? Is this lopsided? What do I do now? I'm on the verge of crisis. How do I avoid the preventable problems? I can't outrun my blind spots. So do I really want to blow myself up to discover them? Well, no. Well, that's where this kind of other rare species of advisor, the corner man, comes into it. And that's what I do, and it's been crafted over the last 60 years, uh, being a performer at the highest level and working with people that play at the highest level in all disciplines. And that's what I do like really well. I feel like that generalist is, maybe it's the hardest person to find for sure. But yet I think it's the integrator of all the parts that can make all the advice of all the experts doable in a person's life.
Do you find that as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about my mom uh,
Yeah.
with her medical conditions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's going to a specialist for this and a specialist for this and a specialist for specialist for this. None of those specialists speak to one another.
That's correct.
So they're each looking at one little, little, I said one
Important
component.
slice of the pie. Yeah.
Yeah, each at a component, but nobody's saying, "Oh, Jane, is this is everybody acting in your collaborative best interest, right, to get
Correct.
you where you want to be?" And the answer is no, because one, system's not set up for that. Two, she's not asking for it. And three, none of them know what the others are prescribing or telling her
Correct.
to do or whatever. And so you're saying, if I hear you right, what you're doing is you're not saying those people aren't needed. You're saying someone needs to work with the athlete or the executive or the other high performer to say, what's the goal here? And are all of these people that are working with you contributing to the goal? And how can, or can I help manage this process to get you to the goal with all the other resources you need?
Yes, because the alchemy of this is that when you have the fewest number of parts in that system, the fewest number of experts that are essential, correct?
Yeah.
And you're extracting that percentage of what they're bringing to it in a way that potentiates through synergy all the other essential parts and no more, then they become a superset that allows exponential things to happen. That's how gold medals are won. It's called coherence. They're won through coherence of parts being optimized, not perfect, but they optimize in a potential output greater than the sum of the parts. And that's also applies to spontaneous healing. Spontaneous healing is the product of body harmony, where all the parts of the body are now working together as an integrated whole. And that's always the missing link in this. And so therefore, there has to be an orchestra conductor that can see how the different parts, well, first off, what are the essential parts and what recommendation from those parts would facilitate and synergize and potentiate the combined collective capacity of the system to enable exponential.
Yeah.
And that's like what I do. Like, you need this person here, this person's advice, 30% of it is correct. Let's not worry about the other 70%. Well, by what authority are you telling me that? Well, number one, I've been in the business. I was an Olympian, so I know what it takes to win. Number two, I'm a sports scientist. The body's the body, whether you're an athlete or not. It's still the same thing. And I know a lot about healthcare because I spent 22 years in clinical practice while I was doing all this other stuff. So we can know how to assemble this so all the parts are working together. It's like a happy family, right?
Right.
If you get everybody doing their job enough, it doesn't have to be perfect, but let's just make sure you pick up your underpants off the floor and then you put your dishes away. As long as everybody's doing that optimized thing, we're not chasing perfection, then you have a family that can watch television together without it being World War III.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
that's kind of what we're looking for. So therefore, the corner man, I just took that because Rocky had Mickey, the old guy, in his corner,
Yeah.
right? Corner man. Okay, great. Corner man is watching your back when you're in the ring slugging it out. We all need that. Look, a lot of people have got millions of advisors that are giving bits and pieces of the information, but they don't have anybody that's looking at things in real time, that taken as a whole and providing advice in real time is to how to capitalize on opportunity and avoid preventable problems. So to me, without that, there's a huge, huge, huge risk of inefficiency and
Mm.
talking ourselves into things that aren't real. So I just feel like the corner man's got to be a consideration there for sure.
Can there's so many things I want to ask you about that. And I know we don't have time for all of them, Jeff, but you mentioned early on that your mentor, Second Angel, I think it was, who helped you with, your temperament, I'll say. So
Yeah,
maybe you had,
helping hands.
you know, maybe you flew off the handle. That was your approach to things that were stressful or something. And I'm
Yeah,
wondering
it's accurate.
with the athletes that you deal with and the executives that you deal with, how frequently do you find temperament to be something that you need to work on with them?
Well, I think you've said a couple times the champion's mindset. It just,
Yeah,
I'd like to adjust a couple things here. It's to say
sure.
that, um, you know, we as humans, we have a certain biology that we all share. That's just part of the physicality. We all have the same organ systems. We all have a brain. We all have, normally 5 fingers and 5 toes, et cetera. But in my opinion, we have two mentalities that make up our human nature. The first mentality is what I call the human mindset. It's a mindset because it's rigid and it's fixed. It's not modifiable. And sometimes we refer to that as human nature. And human nature is very predictable in its response to certain conditions. And the human nature response, in my opinion, is based upon default beliefs that we have, meaning there are certain things that we believe to be true because we're human. Like, for example, I had a streak of good fortune, and because I got the wind at my back, I need to ride this wave as long as possible. So let's keep pushing. Well, champions, they don't think like that. You've had, good fortune. Maybe you should pull back and rest up a little bit and replenish your resources and your energy and rest your team up without pushing ahead too fast. Because if you're running on fumes and your team, uh, you create a mutiny because you're not resting your team too fast, it's probably a really bad idea. But yet it seems right to human nature.
Right.
Or if I want it bad enough, it's going to happen. Well, that's not true either. It'll happen if you have the skill set and your timing is good and you have the right support. But just because you think it, that's not a guarantee. So, or love conquers all. Well, I mean, it sort of does in a God sense for sure, but only to say that a lot of times I know this because of our adopted daughter. My daughter was adopted at the age of 10. It's a very unusual adoption. And there are certain things that just were that are tangible to her and her developmental upbringing. No matter how much I loved her, she was going to have to fight part of her life battle based upon things that I had no influence over and she didn't ask for.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, we have to kind of step onto the field by ourselves. So this human mindset is rigid and it's fixed and it's pretty darn stubborn and it's based on survival. Survival instinct is our most primal instinct, both to survive physically and psychically, should we say. Well, how do I know that, Jeff? Well, number one, have you ever slipped on ice and your hand knows where to put itself to break a fall? Okay, well, that's a survival instinct faster than you can think. And, in survival situations, we better have something that's faster than we can think to save us. Okay, well, what about the mentality side? Okay, well, uh, have you ever thought anything that when said would be just awesome, and you said it and you realize it was the worst thing you could have ever said, and it came out of your mouth so fast you wish you could take it back. But man, did it sure seem like at the moment that you said it. Okay, well, where did that come from? That wasn't really your champion side. Well, it came from me. That's correct. But how did it work out? Well, not so well. It just ruined the relationship forever. Okay, so well, then where did that come from? Well, it was a survival instinct from my human mindset to protect itself when it felt under threat. Okay, great. So we have that part of us that you can't shut off. It's there 24 hours a day. It's part of our biology. It's just there. The champion side, we have a champion's mind. It's not a mindset. The champion's mind is not rigid. The champion's mind is thoughtful. It can receive, it can interpret, it can edit, it can store, and it can transmit information and actions thoughtfully. And we all have that part to us, but because it's not survival, it doesn't get first dibs at every moment, but it does get the final say. Therefore, if we apply historically what the evidence tells us that when applied leads to the predicted outcome that nudges us closer towards a life of excellence in goal achievement, that's what our champion's mind is. But because it's not survival, it doesn't get first dibs, but it does override the human mindset. And one more thing, if I may, is have you ever felt conflicted in life, like this background conflict that's there like 24 hours a day? Should I or shouldn't I? How come I feel this, but then I want to do that? I feel like there's this background tug of war. Well, that's the tug of war between your human mindset, the rigidness that we're all born with that you can't shut off, that gets first dibs, versus our champion's mind that wants to create that life of excellence for you that does get final say when the historical things that lead to the predicted outcomes are applied. And so I just kind of wanted to say that we need to have a fundamental understanding of that first, because if we don't understand that we have kind of two parts and natures within us that are battling for control over our decision making, then we may identify ourselves with the human mindset as being us. Well, that's our biology that we didn't ask for. And it doesn't have to be the us, but it will be if we take action on it and we believe that to be us. And if that's the case, we don't plan on having a life of much value and contribution, because you can't get there if whatever you're doing is based on survival. The only way you can get there is by overriding that and do the things that history has shown that when applied can get us to where we want to get to. So I just want to interject that, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for that. And
Yeah.
so as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, so the champion's mind then is really is a learned skill that allows you, in the temperance example, for temperance thing, for example, allows you to pause, to consider how you're going to choose, to consider and choose how you're going to respond. Or do I have that all wrong, Jeff?
No, you have it. I just need just a little adjustment here. Is that it's not learned.
It's not
that's an eight. It's innate. But we have to, but we have to apply it. We have to apply it for it to be real. And if it's not applied, then your human mindset in those things that we believe to be true that don't deliver on the promise. I mean, how many things have we done that we thought should deliver on something and it doesn't? Like, this person, this is the most beautiful person in the world. I want to marry this person. Then 2 weeks later, you're thinking, what was I thinking? This is the stupidest thing I ever heard of. Well, why was I thinking that? Well, that's a good question. Right. It's because your human mindset had a gravity towards that. And then your champion's mind said, well, hey, hold on a second here. This may not be advisable. So rather than take immediate action on it, like all the experts tell us to do, maybe we should pause here and really look at it and let things cool off a little bit. Yeah. So it's innate within us, but it has to be applied to be maintained, where our human mindset, our default survival impulses are free. And they control the conversation without an override by the conscious application that is identified and applied. That's the only way we can make bigger are normal rather than the occasional exception.
All right. Thank you for that
Yeah, yeah. Thanks
additional
for giving me
context
the
on that. I
opportunity to
appreciate it.
kind of fill in that gap there. Yeah.
Two things I have for you before we end, Jeff. First, you described the relationship a little bit with your dad and how he was out of the picture at 13, and you sort of talked about 60 years of wisdom that you've accumulated, to do the work that you do, and I wondered, because you also wait, if I got my math right, it was also about 60 years before you had your daughter adopted, your
I was
daughter,
50, I was 58 at the time we adopted
50,
our daughter.
58.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering to myself how just how incredible of a experience that has been for you, because coming out of, yeah, just there's a lot of things there. I know we don't have time to get into all of that stuff, but I'm just curious how that's changed you.
Well, thank you. For sure, the greatest contribution in my life ever, for sure. Also the hardest. And so when I was 58, my wife and I were considering adoption prior to that. And again, it was something that occurred to us, and I give everything a look, as does she. And we agreed that this is something that we need to pursue here, which we did. And so we went through all the paperwork and all the stuff that it took to kind of formalize the process.
Right.
And so we pursued an international adoption. We went to Colombia.
Hmm.
And the calling that led to the adoption, when we went there and took legal possession of our daughter, she was 10 at the time, so she had a massive head start on us. And coming from rural Colombia, where thug life rules, um, as I told my wife when we got back to California, I said, look, she doesn't speak any English. I said, we don't speak Spanish. We have no language. And we just adopted this, 10-year-old that comes from a very difficult background, to say the least. I said, she has no school. Like, we're here in America, by the age of 3 months, you should know what graduate school you're going to apply to. You're already enrolled in your GRE curriculum.
Yeah, right.
And we have nothing. We have no well, I guess we had 3 sign language words, like quiet, sleep, and hungry. That's where we started. She has no school, and she has severe PTSD and ADHD from getting beaten up, and worse, for the first 10 years of her life, being bounced around, in the foster care system, where they pack 20 kids in a room together. I mean, it's like parasitic ridden body, ADHD. I mean, this is a formidable foe. I mean, this is not an average situation here.
Yeah,
And
plus things she's seen and experienced, right?
Yeah, look, here's the deal. When she learned that she was being adopted by an American couple, she thought America was some city around the corner from where she grew up. She didn't know there was an America. She didn't even know it. The lights at night from airplanes flying overhead. She thought those were stars. She'd never been in an elevator, never seen a movie, never had a warm shower. I mean, we're talking about severe deprivation, except for learning to be the ultimate survivor, which she was. Raised as a cheat, a liar, and a freaking criminal. Like, what else is there to do? I mean, how are you going to feed yourself? And she told me, Daddy, me, Jeff, her father, adopted father, but I'm for sure her soul father. She used to pick gum up from the street or pull it off the bottom of the chair and chew it to stave off hunger pains, because her family couldn't even give her a cookie for her birthday. I mean, we're talking serious deprivation here, but man, is she a survivor, and man, was she good at the skills that she learned. And so I said to my wife, because this is not an average situation, and because our ambition is not to save a life, our ambition was to manifest a potential, because everybody's got one. That was our commitment. And because I'm a gold medal sort of guy, I'm not about bronze or silver medals. I'm about gold medals. And our gold medal for her is that for me to do this, to be her father, and for my wife to be the mother that she deserved to have, to be given a chance to this, I'm going to need to, starting tomorrow, I need to spend 90% of my professional availability starting tomorrow, and the income that goes with it. That starts tomorrow, because we have to deliver on our promise to her. So that's what we did. And my wife cried every day for 9 years and 10 months. It was so difficult. But my daughter's behavior, she didn't ask for that. That was imposed upon her
Right.
by people. And I felt that there was something in there that, uh, if it be God's will, that that could be addressed enough to give her a chance to manifest who she could potentially come. And that's what I was called to. This was just another Olympic event for me, but only 10 times as hard. You know, the Olympics was easy. You just pedal faster than, 360 million Americans and you go. So, you know, okay, so we checked that box. And now I got it. Now that we have this situation here. So it's been 12 years now, but, and she graduated from college, I'm very proud to say, a year ago. And so that was a massive, I mean, we had a staff of 30 people at senior, psychologists, soccer coaches, there were tutors. I mean, it seemed like we had 30 people keeping her in the game, not doing her work for her because of the depravity of her readiness was so deprived. It took everything that we had to do that. And that's okay too, you know? And so what I learned from this is, number one, you can love anybody. You don't need a special situation. It's not, if I give this, I get, it's not that. No, you decide that you're going to love whoever it is. You just do it. You don't need a special reason to do that. It doesn't need to be your blood. It can be anybody. You just make a decision. The other thing that I learned is that you must have explicit trust and process, because for us, if we could get through one day without a catastrophe, that was a great day. We had no vision of tomorrow. It was too much. All we needed to do is get through today. If we get through today, then that's all we can ask for. And so there has to be explicit trust and process. The other thing that I learned from this is that whatever it takes to keep momentum moving forward, you do it. You do not hold back on anything that you think that you may need in the future for that which needs to be addressed today. So there were times where, there were certain things that were required from a financial perspective that were extraordinary, to say the least. But I knew that I could not hold back on anything for later, because the key to future was what happened now. So there had to be an explicit trust in process, and you have to learn to go all in on things, not being reckless or trying to barter with God or the universe that you'll give if you get something back in return. You don't do that. You show up and you do. It has to go right faithfully. And you know what? It comes from that is a sense of invincibility, because I really felt, and I sort of feel this, like right now, there's nothing that can hurt me. What do you do? Call me a name, or strip away something. It's not going to hurt me. I'm sorry. It's like, there's nothing I haven't faced already. And a lot of the stuff that you think that you need, you don't. And so I was stripped to the bone on everything. And that's okay, because it's like, all I need is a cot in the corner. I need a really top flight bicycle so I can ride every day. And I need a computer where I can interface with people that I love and care about, that rely on my advice to help get them to the promised land and keep them there.
Right.
I don't need a lot, so there's an invincibility that comes along with that. I'll also say that you also learn that there's always enough energy to do anything. If you do things on behalf of other people, there's always enough energy. Where energy becomes sparse is where everything is in one's own self-interest. If life is only about you and satisfying your own fears to have more than you need to feel comfortable and confident in life, you're going to feel empty. You're always going to need energy, because it takes a lot of energy to worry about all these things. There's a certain simplicity here that does matter and is required. And probably the most important thing that I learned in all of this is that you never discount the possibility of a miracle. You have to hold space for a miracle, and don't decide what it's going to be in advance. You dedicate yourself to staying in the game and doing whatever it takes to stay in the game with honor. And if a miracle be available, you petition for it, you pray for it, but you don't command it into existence, because that's against the rules. You got to show up completely in a place of surrender in subservience and a receptivity to guidance to do the right thing and say the right thing and to do the right thing day in and day out. And, for us, it, it was 10 years to get to the point where that breakout, that a miracle occurred enough to know that my daughter's going to make it.
Right.
And so that's, to me, the most important thing that I can share with anybody. There are technical life issues that we need for sure, but at the end of the day, it's kind of about us and how we show up. And one last thing I'll add to this is that the one thing you got to ask yourself every day before you start engaging people, places, and things, you got to decide how you're going to show up. Are you going to show up and take your personal stuff with you? Or are you going to show up and give everything the best of what you've got unconditionally, no bartering whatsoever? I think it's the latter for sure, because people deserve to have the best of what you've got. When you show up from that, when there's other levels of concern and you're providing your, I call it obligation to humanity, then you know what, at the end of the day, whatever happens, I could die right now. If I died right now, I know that there's nothing more I could have done possibly. It's not possible.
Right.
And I showed up of honor. I did everything that I could.
Right.
Whatever I don't have, it's like I don't really need. I'm okay with that because I feel like the scorecard for whatever it was, and I didn't do it to get the scorecard brownie button. I didn't do it for that reason. I did it because it was the right thing to do as I saw it. That's it. And if nobody could ask anything more of me from that. So again, had my daughter had people show up differently for her, the challenges that she faces in terms of the brutality and the inhumanity that was imposed upon her, the consequences and effects of that, she wouldn't have to deal with. Just the normal stuff that we all have to deal with. So other than that, it was a pretty average experience.
Yeah. Thank you for putting that very nice point on the end of it, Jeff. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome,
It's an
Mike. Thank
amazing
you.
story, and I'm so happy to hear that she's doing
She is.
exceptional. She's got obviously two angels in you and your wife, and I'm sure many others, because you mentioned all the other people who've contributed to helping her, and she'll become an angel to many, many people.
Well, I
as
don't
she
doubt that.
moves
Thank you,
down the
Mike.
road. Jeff, last question. You when people hear that you work with, these Tiger Woods, Lance Armstrong, all these big names, they might think, oh my gosh, how could I ever work with Jeff? I mean, I don't compare. We talked about comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah, of
People
course.
listening would
Yeah.
be like, way out of my league. But what does somebody need? What are the characteristics of someone that you can work with?
That's a great question. Well, first off, it's like I only make my decisions about the merits of the person as I see it at that moment in time. My decision on who I'm going to engage with and not is not just about your level of notoriety. It's not about that. There are certain people, in my opinion, like I have a scholarship patient right now client that I'm working with, like right now. She was like chained to a bed for 7 years as a kid.
Mm.
And so, she's a scholarship client of mine because I feel like you got to show up. And she's brilliant, by the way. She's a PhD candidate. She's brilliant. I mean, she's genius. And like, there's a time where you got to step into people's lives. It's not about the pedigree. In my opinion, it's like, again, are you showing up in service to that which you're called to do? And so, with the criteria that's important for me is that, number one, if you're not coachable and you want it your way, then forget it. If you're not committed to doing whatever it takes and have staying power, it's just not a good fit. If you're sincere and you're able to commit 100% mind, body, soul, and financially and find a way, then you're a great consideration. And we go through several different points of conversation to get to a place of formal enrollment to make sure that we're not being premature on anything, to make sure that we've got the right fit, et cetera. Because I really care about people. And it's like I really care about my clients.
Right.
And the responsibility to that and the privilege of kind of being the holders to the path to their bigger future and their legacy. That's an honor that I think is a highest honor that could be bestowed upon anybody. And so that's that. So what I'd offer here is that just sniff around, check me out. I guess I'm somewhere on Google. Just check it out. Then you can go to my website, drjeffspencer.com, and it's a simple website. You're not going to see all these accolades and how great I am. It isn't going to be like that. And if there's a resonance, you'd like to have a conversation of some sort, then you fill out an application. It's really simple. Right, upper right hand corner, you click apply, and then you fill out an application. You send it to me, and when I get it, if I feel that it warrants a conversation, then we'll find a time to have a short introductory conversation, and we'll see what's there and how I might be able to be of service to you. By far the best way to do it. And if you'd like to look at some of the models that I've created that we've alluded here to in the conversation that Mike, that you and I've had, you can go to www.beforeyourwin.com, BEFOREYOUWIN.com. And there'll be some models, a few videos that you can watch, etc. You can go to YouTube, check me out, Instagram. There are some things out there as well. Thanks for the opportunity, Mike, to share, by the way.
Yeah, my pleasure. I just want to end by thanking you for there are some people that want to come across as if they're they know it all. And what I found amazing about this conversation with you, as someone who's got these 60 years to be the great cornerman that you are, who knows, you've done all the all the work, all the study, you've proven yourself beyond what most people could even dream to prove themselves on. But you just come across with such grace and humility. Not only that, so many people in your position, I find, they're like soundbite after soundbite after soundbite after soundbite about, these things that make them special or make you special if you work with them. And you're like preparation, courage, freer, preparation, just all of these, like, this is what it really takes. And I've just been impressed by the way that you handle yourself and the way that you come across. It's easy to listen to, first of all, but it's extremely powerful, most of all. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show, spending so much time with me and my listeners, and really imparting some fabulous wisdom. And I wish you tremendous success. And thank you for what you and your wife did for Maddie, and gave her an opportunity that just amazing. So
yeah, well, thanks for saying that. And as far as the very generous thoughts about the conversation, it's just purely channeling. I'm just sharing with you the experience as it's unfolded, and there's certainly more chapters to come. And I'll just finish up by saying thanks again, Mike, for the opportunity, and also to the listeners here, is that there's always room at the top for the best, and our best is manifesting our gifts. And as long as we're doing that, that's how we make that contribution that impacts billions of people for all of eternity. And let's not discount the value of what our gifts are and the contribution that they're making, because we really don't know. And the one thing that we have power over is our ability to show up and cultivate and grow our capacity for being able to share that with others. And why that's important is that it's how we honor our past through this dimension. It's also how we say thank you to our fans, our friends, our family, our mentors, our benefactors, etc. And probably the most important reason why that's important is that it shows other people what's possible. So thanks, Mike, for the opportunity.
Dr. Jeff Spencer, thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the How'd It Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How'd It Happen podcast.